Oppenheimer? Yeah! Woo! All right. Who are some of your favorite voices that he's done?
SkelEtor.
SkelEtor? Anybody got anybody besides SkelEtor? There's like 1,000. You know.
Merman.
Merman, very good. Very good.
He's killer.
There you go. How about Primeval and Ghostbusters?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get this rolling. Thank you for coming out to Friday afternoon at Phoenix Fan Fest. We're thrilled you could all be here to meet one of the absolute voice acting legends of our time. He has done it all and said it all, or at least the characters he's played have. Whether he's been on screen or giving voice to dozens of beloved animated characters, he's been delighting audiences for decades. Perhaps you'll recognize him from Get Smart, or The $6 Million Man, or his Emmy-nominated run on Murphy Brown. But even if you don't recognize him, you've certainly heard his work before. Of course, he's played SkelEtor, as we talked about, along with dozens of other Masters of the Universe characters, Vanity Smurf, a handful of Transformers on both sides of the fence there, Autobot and Decepticon. So let's give a warm Phoenix Fan Fest welcome to Alan Oppenheimer.
What a great introduction. Who is this man?
Well, Mr. Oppenheimer, you brought hundreds of characters to life.
Is this hot? Yes.
It is hot.
Yes, it's hot. How's that? Is that all right? Clear to you all?
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you. That's a costume and a hat you've got on there. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, well, you brought hundreds of characters to life. I was wondering if out of the vast menagerie of characters you voiced...
Melange, not menagerie.
Melange, there you go.
Thank
If there's any that hold an extra special place in your heart.
Well, SkelEtor, absolutely. The interesting thing is, this is all a huge surprise to me, these conventions and the reception that the characters get. Because we did these 30 years ago, and you do the show, you get paid, you go home, and you forget about it. And then suddenly here, 30 years later, we have fans, and some of whom bring their children and grandchildren and nephews and nieces to these things because they watched them on DVD. And of course, DVD wasn't available 30 years ago. So it's a rebirth of all of this, of all of these cartoons. Nobody paid much attention to the $6 Million Man until the DVD came out recently. So now I've got those fans too. I was Dr. Rudy Wells on that. And it was 9 years as a Smurf, as Vanity Smurf, and did all the episodes on He-Man, Masters of the Universe, 124 episodes in 2 years. So we worked, sometimes we do 2 or 3 shows a day. And then, of course, I started in the theater and back east and out here in California. And a lot of television. I came out in 1966, my God, 50 years ago come out. And the first show I did was Hogan's Heroes. And I wound up doing 3 or 4 of those. All different characters, which was wonderful. And then I did 3 or 4 Get Smarts. One of them was, one of my favorites is called The Man from Yenta. He was an Israeli agent who arrived, and he had to call his mother to let him know he arrived safely. Agent 498. And I did a lot of That Girl and Bewitched, all of those shows. I did 3 Bonanzas in one season, all different characters. I remember the producer said to the casting man, "Is this the only actor out here? How come we're using him 3 times in 1 year?" In one, I played a Mexican mayor. Now you can't do that anymore. You have to hire a Mexican. You know? But they put me in dark makeup, and I came out and rehearsed. Now I'd worked with all these extras for years. They're on the set, mostly comedies at Screen Gems. And I came out and I started to do the rehearsal part. I was doing it like this, and they started to laugh. I said, "Is something wrong with the accent?" They said, "No, it's just that we know you, and now you're playing a Mexican." So I watched the show, and I look like a New York Jew in dark makeup. That's it. So I'm open to all kinds of questions, either cartoon or live or musical comedy or whatever you want, and I'll try and answer them for you.
And just to get us rolling, I mentioned backstage that Get Smart really holds a special place in my heart. So do you have any good Don Adams stories you can share?
Don Adams? Oh my goodness, yes.
Well, I'll tell you one funny thing. I don't know whether it was this episode, The Man from Yentai, or not, but I know that the second act was all three of us wound up as Arab sheiks, and the opening line in rehearsal was, "Will the real Abba Ben Booby stand up, please?" So I said, just offhand in rehearsal, "My name is Abba Ben Booby. I said, oh, that's when I said, "Will the real Abba Ben Booby stand up?" Don Adams said, "Hold it." They went upstairs and they wrote for 2 hours and rewrote the entire second act for that punchline from the panel show. My name is, and Abba Ben Booby, all from just an offhand remark. They don't do that anymore. They don't dare, because they want it done yesterday. Everything's in a rush. But that's one of the funny things. I'll tell you one thing interesting. I was playing poker at Don Adams' house. My back was to the front door. And the door opened. I couldn't see who came in, but all I knew is that somebody came in who had a lot of personal electricity. I didn't know. I stopped, I turned around, and I'd never met Jimmy Kahn before, but boy, when he came through that door, you knew something came in that door. That's my poker story with Don Adams. I don't remember how much I lost that night, but I'm sure it was a lot.
Well, that's great. How about some questions for the audience, from the audience?
Yes, was there any voices that you ever did that maybe hurt your voice or made you lose your voice at some point?
Yes, especially on video games. That's a very good question, because on video games, you do a lot of that stuff, and I won't do them anymore. I refuse to, because it just tears up your throat. I remember one actor named Bob Holt, and he was doing The Great Grape Ape. I don't know if you remember that show. And that was one of these, and halfway through the session, he noticed spatters of blood on the script.
Oh,
I said, "That's the last time I do this." So I won't do those anymore. As a matter of fact, my agent calls and says, "A video game," I said, "I won't do any of that gravel stuff. It's okay with them, otherwise forget it." So I don't do it.
wow.
Good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions from the room?
Or are we all going home?
When you were on $6 Million Man for 2 years,
Yeah.
playing Rudy Wells. I've heard various stories on this, but when Lindsay Wagner first did the first two Bionic Woman episodes where they introduced the character, they weren't talking about a series at the time, right? They were just talking, that was just a one-off, two-part romantic entanglement episode, right?
That's right, she was the guest.
Well, when they did decide to go ahead and go for another series, did they consult you to continue playing Rudy Wells on both series, or what was the story there?
Well, oh God, I've been dying to say this. No, at the end of that third season, it was the second season, not second season, I wanted a small raise. They were not paying me very much. They didn't give me the raise, so they replaced me with Marty Brooks, whom I'd known for years too. Then they decided they got so much fan mail when Lindsay Wagner died that they had to bring her back, but now I wasn't doing it. So they made Marty Brooks up to look like me because they started that fourth season with a flashback of her and me, now Marty, made up with a mustache and all of this right here. And then as he went on, they allowed Marty to become like himself.
Yeah.
But it all fell out over negotiation.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
I'll tell him you said so.
Well, I mean, I like both of you very well as Rudy Wells, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like, it would be like replacing DeForest Kelley with another actor halfway through Star Trek. It just didn't feel right,
No.
It kind of changed the mood of the show.
It does, because the approach is different.
Yeah.
The approach is different with two different people.
Didn't they, now, this goes back, because I haven't seen it since the original, since I was a kid, but didn't they also have this confusing skipping through time or something, where originally it was supposed to take place many years ago, and then suddenly it was taking place now, or something like that?
Are you talking about $6 Million
Yeah,
Man?
$6 Million Man.
Well, did they do flashbacks of then and now? Well, that was hard, because I had to make Marty Brooks look like me. I don't know.
Oh, because I was just going to ask you if that was confusing for you, but okay, maybe my...
Wasn't confusing to me, I was gone. That's up to you, the audience, that sits there as a little boy and says, I don't get this at all.
You were talking earlier about the different types of voices and the direction they give you.
Yeah.
How much input do you have into what a character is going to sound like versus how much the producer or director wants a character to sound?
Almost total input. Because if you audition for it, and once I got started at Filmation or Hanna-Barbera, they just cast me and they trusted that whatever I would come up with. But for instance, like with SkelEtor, they showed me the drawing, the cell. And some people ask me, well, how'd you come up with that voice? Well, he has a bony head. So I figured there wasn't a lot of resonance.
It was more, up in here. So that's how I came up with that.
Excuse me. And then, I don't think originally it was a comedic villain. I think it was more a straight villain. And I don't do that. I always try to find comedy even in the most deepest drama, because I think that's what life is. So I don't know how I came up with the laugh, but it happened, and that is the signature. I had some fantastic experiences with that. I was telling David. My wife and I were taking a trip to South America, and we were in Santiago, and we hired a car and a driver, and we had a guide. So we're in the car, and the guide said, what do you do? I said, I'm an actor. The driver says in Spanish, what does he do? She says, actor, or whatever it is in Spanish. I mix my Spanish and Italian a little bit. So he said in Spanish to her, well, what movies? So I tell her the movies that I did, Westworld, NeverEnding Story, Freaky Friday, all that stuff. And she tries to translate that into Spanish. It means nothing to him because the titles mean, I don't know how those translate to. So finally I said, well, ask him if he ever watched cartoons. So she said to him, did you watch cartoons? He said, yeah. So I went, whoa! He almost hit the right curve. The same thing happened in Buenos Aires. Different driver, different guide, same reaction. It's a universal laugh.
And how did you come up with so many unique voices for
Well,
that
now
show?
Merman is underwater. So I can't even like that. Walking the water like a gargling all the time. And, well, a man-at-arms is straight. That's just me. Beast Man, what did I did Cringer, that's right. Cringer. Cringer's easy because he's cowardly, And then they put in the roar afterwards. That's not my roar, that's some kind of generic roar. It's got nothing to do with me. And I don't remember what the voice of Beast Man was, but it was probably kind of outrageous. Anybody here do Beast Man? Help me out. I imagine it was something like that.
Perfect.
Then I did Vanity Smurf. And Vanity Smurf, and, he's just self-absorbed with his mirror, and he's so pretty. So that's how that came about, very light, lighter than air is Vanity. He started out as Jack Benny, which I used to do. I always did Jack Benny, but then he became kind of fey. We called him Fag Smurf.
Okay. Do you have any favorite SkelEtor quotes you'd like to share?
Well, a lot of the insults wound up on the cutting room floor. They couldn't be aired. I mean, people like the use of the word "you boob" or "you fool." Those were mild compared to what was never printed. Use your imaginations.
Okay, well, I know, oh, yes.
I got a question. When you're doing voice acting, you're sitting in a booth by yourself, but do you have a technician or a producer that really worked with you that you can remember that push you beyond your acting abilities that
Well, most of the time when we did an episode, all of us were together, three of us were together. John Irwin, who did Man at Arms, Linda Gary, who passed away much too early, and she did Evil Lynn and so forth. And the three of us would work together, bouncing off of each other. There was a time in 1985 when I was working 2 days in London and 3 days in LA. So during that 6-week period, I would come back and I'd have to do that by myself. So they would play me what they had done so I could answer sensibly to what I was fed. And very often, Lou Scheimer, who produced and directed those episodes, then he would say, no, we have to listen to it again, and then I would do it again. But Lou never pushed you in any direction, he just made sure that the blend was correct. I have worked with directors who pushed you. I remember on Transformers, I did Transformers, and the director would say, no, don't say, I want you to stop right now. I would be saying, I want you to stop right now. He'd say, no, 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 do it. I want you to stop right now. I said, okay. I want you to stop right now. No, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to stop right now. He had no ear. So I had to kind of interpret, what did he really mean? And I would try and put a different twist on it. He said, yeah, that's what I said. That's what I wanted. Yeah.
Do you have a count of all the character voices you've created? And have you ever used the same voice twice for different characters?
Yes. I used, what's his name? I told you I stole for myself. I stole SkelEtor.
Oh, Man at Arms?
No, no.
No, Primeval.
Primeval.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I stole Primeval, but that's plagiarism of yourself doesn't count, does it?
I wouldn't think so.
No.
What are you going to do, take yourself to court?
But that's about, as far as I can see, that's about the only time I remember doing that. I remember on Brave Star, I did Scuzz, and the cigar in his mouth, Scuzz, you know, he's kind of Western, Sheriff Scuzz. So I would put a pencil in my mouth so that I get that kind of a sound, you know. Sounds like George Scott, doesn't it? Yeah, who I worked with. What an angel he was. Yes, I did the Hindenburg with George Scott. Great man. I missed him. Wonderful man. What was your original question?
How many character voices did you
I have to look on my IMDb because I really don't remember all of them. And some people say, well, you did this. I said, I don't remember doing that. Did I do that? I didn't remember that.
There was some back and forth over whether or not you'd voiced Scooby-Dum.
I did.
Yes.
I did voice Scooby-Dum, yes. Well, Scooby-Dum was kind of easy to do because he's just plain stupid and slow. Scooby-Dum. Casey Kasem was a wonderful Scooby-Doo. Or did he do the other character? What did Casey? Shaggy.
Yeah,
He was wonderful. So Scooby-Dum was easy. I mean, he's just a dog kind of dumb. First time I went out to meet Joe Barbera, I just had surgery on my knee, excuse me. And so my wife drove me out there to meet Joe, and I go in, I'm on crutches, you know. And he said, well, this is a voice of a dog. Can you talk like a dog? I said, no, I don't talk like. He says, okay, fine, let's start talking. So on the way back, my wife said, is this what you do for a living? Voiceover is a combination of imagination, picturization, mostly imagination, just gotta open this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just got to, oh, I must have loosened it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you lose.
You've just got to be brave and jump in and try something, and often it's wrong. You hear it back and say, wait a minute, I know, I want to do this again. I'll tell you an example of that. The NeverEnding Story, Falcor. Wolfgang Peterson came to, Wolfgang Peterson came to Los Angeles, and I auditioned for him. The film had already been done. They needed the voice of Falcor. So he auditioned me, and he said, that's fine, that's good. Okay, I'll see you in Munich. So great. So a month or two later, they flew me over to Munich, and I look at a playback on, now I have to, what's called looping or ADR, I have to match what that puppet's mouth did. So I was always pretty good at that. Remind me to tell you another anecdote about that related to Bonanza. But let's get back to Falcor. And I did that whole session in about 2 or 3 hours. And I said, he said, that's fine, that's very good, fine, fine. I said, can I have a playback on that? He said, yeah, of course. He played it back, and I said, no, I have to do it again. You have to do it again. I said, it's not right. Oh, but all right, we have to come back tomorrow. I said, good, we come back tomorrow. And I did it again, and what the difference was that the first day it was technically correct, but it had no heart. And I recognized that right away, and the second day, he was the sweet character with the heart, and he said, yeah, that's good, let me take that. Bonanza. You remember Haas, what the hell was his name?
Dan Walker.
Blocker. Love that man. So we're over doing the ADR, again matching, because we're in the Western and there's planes flying over, you know, so we have to redo all the voices that were done outdoors. And after the session, Dan says to me, let me give you a tip, Alan, if you don't mind. I said, yeah, why? He says, when you're doing an outdoor scene, don't move your lips. It makes it easier to loop later. I said, well, that's wonderful. So now, if you're on a horse and you're doing an outdoor scene, you say, they went that away, not they went that away. It's too hard to match. But if you say, they went that away, well, that's easy to match, isn't it? So thank you, Dan.
When you're doing like multiple characters in the same show, like with He-Man, how hard is it to jump between voices and keep everything straight?
I thought you'd never ask. Most actors will do one voice all the way through and then pick up the other voice all the way through. Well, I like to play it with myself, so I would do it all, talking to myself. Like,
Merman, what do you want?
oh, I just want to get through here. I don't want to run here, get rid of him. So I love doing it that way.
Over here.
Oh, I was just going to, you mentioned George C. Scott, and I wondered what other actors or actresses you enjoyed working with that stand out in your mind.
Well, Jimmy Stewart, Doris Day. I worked with, some of the names I don't remember. When it comes up, I said, geez, I worked with him. I was on Broadway with Glenn Close and Betty Buckley 3 years in Sunset Boulevard. I did Cecil B. DeMille. And then I worked in a musical stock with some great people too. Oh gosh, who was a great actress who was in Silence of the Lambs?
Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster. I did Freaky Friday with her, which was one of her first pictures. I did Star with Julie Andrews. If I could only remember. Oh, Yul Brynner and Dick Benjamin in Westworld. Mm-hmm. If they're my age or a little younger, I worked with all of them. Doris Day was interesting. She would only be shot from this side. She thinks that was her good side. She looked good to me on both sides, but she had only shoot this side. A lot of women do that, you know. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, how did your kids or grandkids react to hearing your voice on their podcast?
They have no reaction. They don't even care.
That's why.
They don't know. I'm just their father or pops. That's all. There's nothing else. They just take it. They take it all in stride. They're still that way.
Right there.
In animation, sometimes people will record entire roles and then get recast as somebody else because you don't have to worry about continuity. Do you have any moment where you recorded an entire role but it was never heard, or where you took over for somebody else who had recorded?
Well, I remember I have looped some people who were not available. Oh, God, great actor. English actor who wouldn't fly over to do this one thing. So they auditioned half a dozen of us and I got the job. And I just had to listen. I have a pretty good ear. So I would listen and then I copied him pretty much so. And then My Three Angels, who was the fellow who introduced them all? Huh?
Charlie.
Charlie, who played that part?
Oh,
Well, he was living in Santa Barbara and he wasn't well. So I came pretty close to what he did and they hired me for that. I expect that I've been replaced. I've certainly been cut out of things, I know that. My first picture was A Heat of the Night. I wound up on the cutting room floor. I just opened the door now. They send me $50 a year for my opening the door, but they cut the scene.
You know, you were talking a little bit about what it's like behind the microphone when you're doing things in the studio. Is there a difference doing the voiceover work for cartoons than from doing video games?
Video games lack subtlety. They're really out there and they're violent, and you do 3 different versions of the same scene. Because in a video game, the player makes the choice of which way he wants to go. I find it extremely difficult and unrewarding and very hard on the voice. So I don't do it anymore. I've done several, but I won't do it anymore. I can't take it. All right?
I was going to ask, is there any tips or tricks you do to save your voice, like drinking lots of hot tea, drinking water, things like that?
Well, water, room temperature, not ice water. Water, room temperature. And use the microphone. You don't have to shout. You can get in here like this. That's the way I did Rock Biter. Oh, yeah, this is good. If I do it back here, it strains the voice. It's much easier to do it in here. It's more effective. This is a great tool. Use it.
I think there was some in the back. Oh.
You've had such a wide range of voices. What kind of fun have you had in drive-thrus, telemarketers?
Yo, but you give me a hell of an idea. I usually just hang up on the bastards, but I'll keep on their mind. That's a great idea. Thank you. You get 10% of nothing, but it's better than nothing.
You know, that kind of prompts one of the questions I wanted to ask. I know you've done a few of these types of shows now. What are some of your favorite memories from meeting fans and interacting?
Oh, I've been doing this 2 years now, and I think maybe a total of, 10 or 12 shows in 2 years. The first thing that just stunned me was when people say, you voiced my childhood. I see a lot of heads going like this. Yes, indeed. I've also had some, I hope I get through this. I always tear up, I'm sorry. I've had a lot of 4 or 5 key people come up to me and tell me how an episode of He-Man saved their lives from suicide. They came from severely dysfunctional families, and here's a 6- and 7-year-old who's thinking of ending his life, or her life. And at the end of He-Man, there was always a little moral. that they put in. This gave them the courage to go on. That's pretty damn humbling. I have a lot of trouble saying this, as you can see. But that's a kind of reward in itself, isn't it? Those are my two big memories from all of these conventions with SkelEtor. On that happy note, let's go on.
Yeah, right here.
Was there a specific episode that was the most memorable to you on the Masters of the Universe?
No, there really wasn't, no. They came so fast and furious. We did 2 a day and sometimes 4 a week. 124 episodes in 2 years we did. So, no, there was nothing. I know that we always had a great time working together, John Irwin and I cannot get John out to do this, what I'm doing here. He is so shy. And he said, well, you know, I don't look like He-Man. I said, well, God damn it, I don't look like SkelEtor. And Superman doesn't look like Superman. They have enough sense to know that. Well, no, I just don't do that. So I can't get him out of the house to do it. I wish he could. The line would be around the block. But he won't do it. But we had a wonderful time recording together. And he's a great man, but he just is very shy.
That's a good time for me to mention that you have She-Ra joining you on a panel tomorrow, as well as it's Melendi Britt and Tom Cook, and they'll be right back in this room at 3 o'clock. So don't miss that. That's
Tom
gonna be
animated
fun.
a lot of the stuff. He was a serious, long-time animator at Hanna-Barbera and Filmation, so he did a lot of these, if not all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, one question I've always had, because I've never tried to audition for a voiceover part, other than the obvious visual aspect, or, you know, preparing to look like the character. What's the key difference to you between auditioning for a live action character versus auditioning for doing a voiceover or an animated character?
Well, a voiceover or animated, you don't have to look like the character.
Right.
I mean, it's all your imagination, what you bring. It starts here. It really starts here, and then it goes. Now, you may use your body to accentuate something, but you don't have to look like SkelEtor. I don't look like any of these people. But I visualized them. And I was blessed with this visualization and imagination. When I was a kid, I was sick a lot, and I was in bed under oxygen tent and all of that. And there was no television, but there was radio, and I loved radio. That's, I think, what influenced me, and I could copy those characters. I mean, I did Bogart. I used to do Bogart a lot. There was a friend of my mother's who just was crazy about Bogart. So when I called her, no, it wasn't a telemarketer. When I called her and I said, hello, Edna, sweetheart, how are you? Oh, Alan, how are you? That went on for 50 years, until the day she died. So it's visualization and imagination. Really, and it's radio. That's all it is. You don't have to look the part. You don't even have to dress the part. That's one of the things I did not like doing Star Trek, the long makeup, the 3-hour makeup. Oh, did I hate that.
Do you have a question?
I was wondering, you talked about what a heavy volume of recording you would do in a short period of time. Did you take any time to rehearse those lines, or could you read them and still know?
Well, yeah, we did a kind of loose run-through, yes. We did a loose run-through, and sometimes lines would be changed, you know, when they heard them. Lou would say, no, change that line to this or this. So, but I don't think we ever read it as a cold reading for recording. I think we read through it. And I know on the Smurfs, we read through it a couple of times, because Gordon Hunt, who was directing it, was a real stickler about that. And, oh yeah, you asked who I worked with, Jonathan Winters, Paul Winchell. Oh yeah, Johnny Winters was pretty funny, and Paul was brilliant. He was an inventor, you know, in addition, Paul Winchell. In addition to being a puppeteer, he was also an inventor, patented many things, medical. As a matter of fact, he worked on the original artificial heart. Yes, ma'am.
If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Hair. Too late. late, my boy, too late. It all started falling out in basic training when I was 21.
I was going to say, you mentioned Jonathan Winters, and he was very close to Robin Williams. They were very close. What was it like working with Jonathan Winters? Because he seemed like he just went off, and he would just. What was that experience like?
I think you just nailed it. He would just go on. I remember the first time we worked together, he did 20 minutes before we could ever start recording. We all sat there, we were hysterical. Well, the second time we worked together, we cut it down to 10 minutes. And the third time, Gordon said, "We don't have time, Jonathan, we got to move along." I ran into after the first time I worked with him, I was eating out with a lady friend, and he was at the same restaurant. He stopped by the table and said, "Oh, he did 20 minutes standing." My sister in New York saw him walk out of the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Fifth Avenue, and he saw the audience there. Sorry, this is Robin Williams who did this. He did 20 minutes standing on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum. Yeah. The two brilliant men.
You've done so many cartoon voices. Was there a time in your career where you're working on several cartoons where you were really busy at the same time?
Yes. Yes. In the 1980s, I was working on half a dozen shows. And yes, you could, and doing narrations and voiceovers for commercials. So it was very often where you do 3 or 4 a day, and you work at 10 o'clock here and 12 o'clock there and 2 o'clock here. Oh, yes. How
much sleep would you get?
How much what?
How much sleep would you get during that time?
Oh, I got more sleep then than I do now.
Oh,
no. No, those were wonderful days. And it's interesting, the days of radio in the 1930s and 40s, those radio actors, and they were a club, a few of them. And when I started doing voiceovers in California, there were about 10 of us in Los Angeles who had the West Coast sewed up, and about the same number in New York. Well, now there's a few thousand. But that's the way we did it. And in New York, I remember hearing stories about guys who would, and ladies who would work do a radio show at CBS, hop a cab over to NBC, do another show, hop a cab, get back to CBS for the next one. Come in sometimes almost on their line cue. That's how close they came.
Wow.
Other questions from the audience? Well, okay.
Sorry. Was there any character that you absolutely didn't like to do? Anyone that you just really...
I hated Star Trek. I really hated it. I'm not a science fiction fan. They tell me I did a good job, and I don't care. That's just, I just do not like, I don't like reading science fiction, and I don't like doing it. But $6 Million Man was not science fiction to me, any more than Westworld was, because those are things that are happening now, aren't they? Artificial limbs. I've got a couple of them right here. I'm not going to show you. But anyway, seriously, folks. No, I mean, they're replacing, look what they're doing veterans now. I mean, fingers that respond off of your brain waves. And that was all science fiction, but started way before those shows. I mean, Bradbury and Asimov and stuff like that. That's the kind of fiction that I'll buy into. I'm not much for interplanetary travel and all of that stuff. It just doesn't interest me.
Okay, looping back, one question I wanted to ask you is, I know the $6 Million Man is being rebooted, just like every other property out there, and Mark Wahlberg is making a movie. If you were approached for a cameo, would you be interested?
How much?
Sadly, I can't provide that information.
Well, that's not going to happen. I asked my agent, I said, well, whoever they cast as SkelEtor, it doesn't do it right anyway. Do you think I can get a job looping him? She says, forget it. Forget it. No, they'll stay with whoever they hire. Frank Langella did it once in a movie. Now, I've known Frank since we first started out in New York. But Frank Langella's not SkelEtor. He's a damn good actor, but he's not SkelEtor. So, there's certain, we can't do everything, you know? There's certain things you just can't do.
Were you ever asked to play a character that you felt like you couldn't do?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was cast in one at the Mark Taper Forum, and I've been rehearsing for about a week and a half, and I just didn't get it. I couldn't, no matter what the director said, I'd try it, and I just didn't get it. Finally, I came in one day and I said, "Can I talk to you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I think I've been miscast in this." He says, "Oh, thank you. I didn't know how much longer I'd have to wait to tell you. Thank you for telling me." I said, "No, I can't do it. I'm wrong for it." He says, "I know. Okay, goodbye. Good luck." Yes, we can't do it all.
Any other questions from the audience?
If you could be any of your characters for one day, who would it be and what would you do during that day?
Well, which character had the most money and had the happiest life? I really can't answer that question. I never thought about it, and I couldn't possibly answer that question. My real life is pretty good now, so it's full enough for me.
Have you seen any good parodies of any of the characters that you've played? I mean, I know we've seen parodies of the $6 million man himself, but has Rudy ever been parodied, or any of your other characters?
Has who ever been parodied?
Rudy in the $6 billion man, or
Oh, I didn't know that. Somebody's doing a parody of Rudy Wells?
Well, I don't know.
I think he's asking if you've ever seen anyone do a parody.
No, I know, I'm not aware of that, no.
I think it would be a great matchup on Archer or something, you know, to see
Yeah.
something like that.
No, I'd be happy to go on Saturday Night Live and do SkelEtor. You got an in there? Get me on it. In the meantime, I'm going to work on this telemarketer idea. I love that.
This spring, in the Comicon here, there was a T-shirt that I actually had, and I didn't bring mine, but it has a SkelEtor, kind of Day of the Dead SkelEtor kind of thing on it. I didn't bring mine. Does anybody here have that? A shirt? No? Oh, shoot.
He's buying it. He's buying it. Are you here tomorrow? Can you get it?
Yeah, I can bring it, yeah.
Bring it tomorrow. I'll sign it for you.
Oh, okay. I'll bring a white mark.
I'll put
That's also.
I'll put George C. Scott on it.
And that's an excellent place for me to mention that Alan is here signing autographs, and he'll be very happy to sign your T-shirts, whatever, body parts, whatever you'd like. So please go and see
I don't
him.
do underwear. No.
Well,
Okay.
with a few exceptions, I suppose. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I did. Did you ever watch, or do you ever watch the cartoons the finished product?
Not at the time, I didn't. Even the same thing with all the TV or the movies, because I would always say that's the worst job I've ever done. But time heals all wounds. And so if I watch something now that I did many years ago, I say, that's pretty good. As a matter of fact, we were on a plane, and I'd done a movie with Richard Pryor, called, I forget what it was called, one-word title, one of his last movies. And I said to my wife, I said, "Oh God, I can't get out, I'm at 30,000 feet. But I said, I overacted terribly. Well, I watched it, now it was, 10, 15 years later, and I laughed and I said, Jesus, that was pretty good work. So at the time, I remember I went to a screening of Little Big Man, which I was in. And I'm standing in the men's room and a guy next to me says, "Good movie, isn't it?" I said, I don't like it. He said, "You didn't like it." I was too close to having finished it, so now I look at it and I know how great that movie is.
It's a classic.
My first job on Bonanza, I went to dailies the next day to watch what we just filmed. And the director afterwards said to me, "You are barred from dailies. You cannot come." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because if you see something and you don't like it, you'll do lousy work the next time. If you see something and you do like it, you'll repeat it and it'll be wrong. Do not come to dailies." And I never went after that. They asked Ethel Barrymore, remember Ethel Barrymore, the actress? "What did you think when you saw yourself in some of the movies?" She says, "I never look at movies that I've done. I've never seen myself on stage. I see no reason to see myself on film." I think that's pretty accurate answer.
All right, well, I'm just going to ask one more question, and we'll end on a good note here. You've done so much. You've been on so many different shows. What was the most fun you ever had showing up at work?
You talking about live or television or what?
Take it any direction you want. I guess I was thinking television.
David, there's been so many of them. I love doing musicals. I did about 24 musicals. And I love doing theater. I was in repertory for 10 years at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. And I loved all of that stuff and all the TV. It was I can't think of anything except Star Trek that I didn't like doing. I really threw myself into it all, loved it. Worked with some great people, some of whom I've mentioned today. And I had no particular favorite. Some of those big name stars that I worked with deserve to be big name stars. They were wonderful, wonderful people and very giving. Does that answer it?
I think so. Thank you. Yes.
What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Coffee.
Yum.
Coffee, chocolate,
Sure, why not?
coffee with chips in it.
Have you ever thought of writing a memoir?
I've been asked to by family members, and I say, you never want to read those things.
I don't know.
What I would put in it, and you never want to read. I can tell anecdotes, but I never want to do an autobiography. No.
That's another good reason to go get an autograph, because I bet you he'll share some anecdotes with you. Okay, so, as I said, he's signing autographs just directly in the back of the photo op area. And the legend recognition banners are. Let's have a warm thank you to Mr. Alan Oppenheimer. Thank you.
That's in honor of my granddaughter, who's a sophomore. Thank you.
Bye-bye.